from me to this. Thank you, Divya. So welcome from me again to those of you who've joined on our Gender Equity in Education Finance webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We do have Spanish and French interpretation today. So please look for the globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen and select the language you want. And you do have the option to mute the original audio instead of hearing it at a lower volume. Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Este webinar tendrá interpretación a español. Por favor, busque el icono del mundo en la parte de abajo de la pantalla de Zoom. Haga clic y seleccione el idioma que desea. Bonjour à tous, très bienvenue. Pour accéder à l'interprétation en français, vous voulez rechercher l'icône du monde en bas de l'écran Zoom. Cliquez et sélectionnez la langue souhaitée. Merci bien. And just to let you know that the Q&A option is available, so please do feel very welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar, either to the whole panel or to specific panelists. And we're going to try and reserve around 10 minutes at the end of the conversation for that Q&A session. So before introducing our panelists, allow me the liberty of briefly setting the stage. Globally, as I'm sure you're all aware, 122 million girls are out of school, and women account for around 2/3 of the 765 million adults who lack basic literacy skills. Despite the challenge, the teaching workforce, as you may know, is predominantly female, particularly at the pre-primary level. But as we move up that leadership ladder, especially into school ownership, into school management, the representation of women significantly diminishes. I think the data is pretty limited, but we do know that women make up only, I think, about a quarter of new school business owners and directors overall, with female sole proprietors making up just around 1/3 on average. I think those statistics are quite stark, and they really do highlight a very critical gap. So while girls might be attending school, not all of them, but some, and while there are women employed in the workforce, their overall position in the economic landscape remains really insufficient. And we probably won't have time to touch on it today, but that disparity is even more evident when we come to talk about TVET, or technical vocational education and training, which continues to be very gendered and continues to keep young girls particularly in quite traditional roles. So I think the question that we must be asking ourselves is, how can we leverage education finance as a tool to break down these barriers? I think we all know that finance is a universal challenge for low-income communities, but financial solutions have been very rarely designed with the specific needs of women, girls, and marginalised groups in mind. And that's really why we're here today. So our panelists will be discussing how financial tools can be gender mainstreamed to address these really pressing issues. So let me go right ahead and introduce our panelists. First, we have Adela Sagustume. So Adela is the Manager of Social Impact and Corporate Relations at Fundación Génesis in Guatemala, one of the country's leading MFIs. And Adela brings over 27 years of extensive experience in microfinance. And I think, Adela, you've been a real driving force behind the Fundación's really excellent social performance ratings, I should say, in recent years. Welcome. And also welcome Jean-Patrick Kimani, who is the Senior Manager for Branch Banking and Partnerships at Sidian Bank in Kenya. Like Adela, John brings over 20 years experience in banking. And I think, John, you've got a particular focus on supporting gender and education finance initiatives. So welcome to you. And finally, Cameron Aziz. So Cameron is the CEO of Talim Finance, which is a non-bank finance company in Pakistan. I believe, Cameron, it's the only institution that's dedicated to education finance in the country. And you're really committed, I know, to gender equality, gender equity in this work. Some of you might be familiar with Cameron from his work leading Cash Foundation, also in Pakistan. And I think Cash won the European Microfinance Award, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago for its phenomenal work with integrating and promoting education, access to education through microfinance. So Adela, John Patrick, and Cameron, thank you so much for joining this conversation. I think we'll be discussing some actionable strategies, some ideas, shifts and beliefs that can really pave the way for meaningful change in gender equity through education, finance. Um, Hopefully you can all, we've got John Patrick and Adela. Are we still struggling to get Cameron to join? Divya, any comments?
Yes, Deborah, we are still trying to. Zoom is not letting one of the panelists in due to some technical errors, but we are trying our best so we could get started with other panelists and we'll let Kamran join in as soon as we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Divya. So I think the way we're going to have this conversation is we'll start by talking about the business case for gender equity in education financing, and then we will come to the social case or impact case before turning over to some of the challenges maybe, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So, the business case. What is the business case for adopting a gender lens or approach in education finance? John Patrick, Adela, you're both leading or managing very large scale financial institutions in your countries. And we know that a business case really drives those decisions. I'd love to know, I guess, what business case led you to adopt, if you like, a unique approach to finance that specifically supports women, particularly in the area of education finance. Adela, maybe I could start with you. I know that the client base of Fundación Genesis is predominantly serving women and also serving women in remote and rural areas. And I understand there's some low literacy levels, particularly with Indigenous populations in the Highlands. Could you give us some context, maybe, and perhaps an example of market opportunities that you've seen from Fundación Genesis in Guatemala to really serving the needs of women and girls? Thanks, Adela. Over to you.
Gracias a ti, Débora. Un gusto saludarles. Muy buenos días. ¿Sí me escuchan bien? ¿Estamos?
Can you hear me okay?
Perfecto.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. In Guatemala, we have been working for 36 years, and our mission, our goal that moves us has to do with three challenges. Poverty had to do with covering basic needs, and obviously quality of living and basic services. And something that has crossed the whole foundation has been education. In Guatemala, we are talking about 5.6 years. That would be the average years that people are actually studying. And when we talk about women, it is much less. So, taking this into account, we really want to develop something that is sustainable, and our vision is totally comprehensive. We would like to provide capital to work in order to generate more income. And the idea is that all of these resources, all of these capacities can be also invested both in health and in education. And in general, we would like people to be absolutely comfortable with the way of living. We are talking about 72% of participation of women. And something that we would like to take into account is whatever has to do with all the programs that we are offering in order to strengthen this productive capacity. There is a higher participation in women, and there is a higher impact in women regarding these practices, mainly regarding how to manage their businesses. We have also seen that empowering women has also impacted in the investment that they make in education for their girls and for their boys. This means that the impact is much higher, and it's not only for education for men, but also for women. As we know, and this is repeated in every single country or in main countries, in order to prioritize the education for girls and for boys, it is hard. In the case of Guatemala, poverty is very important and it is very representative in indigenous and native women. And our mission has been our key role, our key strategy in order to try to generate capacities, skills, and generate economic development, mainly for women, in order to join this with trainings and with all this model of the foundation. This has led to empower them, to develop them in their different aspects, in their different activities. We have a lot of metrics. Everything is already digital, and we have everything collected in order to know and in order to have the variables, everything that has to do with social and finance aspects. As I said, 7 out of 10 are women, and we know exactly what they are lacking. And this is how we can be strategically managed in order to resolve these basic needs, especially with women. Metrics also tells us that women are also really responsible regarding their payments. So the portfolio is very healthy, and this allows us to have clients that actually renew their operations. They can know exactly how they are going to pay, and we can have the metrics, the necessary metrics, in order to know how they start and how every time that they renew this, they can be far away from poverty and we can solve basic needs. And I think that would be it. I don't know if you want me to elaborate on anything.
Great context for us. And, you talk about the need for segmentation. Women are not a homogenous group. They're not a monolith. So that was very interesting and a great reminder, I think, in the case of Guatemala, particularly of the intersecting inequalities that I think are pervasive across all phases of education. Very much linked to poverty, as you mentioned. At this point, I'd love to welcome Cameron. Hi, Cameron. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties in getting you up here, but it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Hi. We were just starting the conversation, Cameron, looking at the business case. And I know with Talim, you're the only specialized education finance provider in Pakistan, and it's a country of huge need. And I was wondering whether you could just comment on that briefly in terms of, the business case perspective. What led you to adopt a gender lens or approach to education financing in Pakistan?
Thank you so much for that, Deborah. And once again, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And apologies for the technical glitch. It happens to the best of us. But yes, in terms of the business case for education financing in Pakistan, Deborah, the fact that we're a country of 250 million people and the number of out-of-school children is a whopping 26 million, which 2/3 of that number is girls, right? Even the children that are in school, which is another 30 to 35 million, the quality of education being imparted over there doesn't have the kind of quality. And one of the biggest challenges is access to relevant finance for the 300,000 plus low and middle cost private education institutions that are in there. So the fact that we felt that it was so important that to enable these institutions to focus on providing quality education and thus creating that opportunity for girls and boys, we needed to have an institution that provided the financing that really
fournissait le financement, qui pouvait changer.
For example, making sure that the children who are sitting on the floor first need to give them an environment which helps them, get what they are studying, give them an environment which actually then leads to better learning outcomes. So the business case over here was that with such a huge population and such a huge population of girls that are in school and out of school, and the ones that are in school are not getting the kind of quality, we wanted to make sure that the financing is targeted towards all these private education institutions in a manner that no one's done this in Pakistan before, but it's being done in the world. It's a tested model. So giving higher loan sizes which really matter, loan sizes which enable the school to change, you add another classroom, get the entire infrastructure upgraded, get furniture that can, have these children sit on better chairs. And then the other factor, Deborah, which has to be noted is that 80% of the staff, the teachers in these low-cost schools in Pakistan, interestingly, are women. So even from that perspective, you are targeting a sector that has such a huge employability. So one of the highest ranking employability of the educated women workforce in Pakistan are these low-cost schools that hire women. So the business case has so many different dynamics that I can keep talking about it, but I'll stick to the time and go to the next point. But that's what's encouraged us, and what we've been able to demonstrate over the last few years is that there's a huge business case for expanding this program, taking it to every part of the country, and that's what we're endeavoring to do.
Thanks, Kamran. You've certainly convinced me of the business case in just a few short minutes. And some of the statistics that you shared with us, is 26 million girls out of school. Even the girls that are in school are not learning in all cases. So that's a great reminder. Thank you so much. I'd like to bring John Patrick into the conversation. So John Patrick, your experience in Nigeria, sorry, my brain has gone for a minute. Sidian Bank, yes. Could you, I know the difference perhaps between your organization and Talim is that you're on the sort of more of the beginning journey in terms of your education finance portfolio. And whilst you do lend to schools and you do lend to parents, I think you're working with Opportunities Education Finance team to really deepen the penetration and the outreach of that portfolio. But from your perspective, I know Sidian Bank has a desire to serve women and girls. What's your experience, and what do you see as that sort of market opportunity for reaching women and girls through your portfolio? Thanks.
Thank you, Deborah, for the opportunity. Now, for us as Sidian Bank here in Kenya, we believe in the mantra that you empower a woman and you've empowered a community and a nation as a whole. So based on that, and where we come from back in the day, because back in the day as a bank, we were known as KREP Bank, which was basically we started as an NGO, which was Kenya Rural Enterprise Program, focusing mainly on women and youth. And based on the support that we are giving the women and youth through things like table banking and the likes, we were able to help them start businesses that were able to cater to their daily needs. So as the needs grew, so did the opportunity for us to be able to make sure that they are able to access education. And as much as we now converted into a commercial bank, our key focus areas and our pillars for financing is WASH, agri, health, and education. Now, having said that, we saw the opportunity. The government of Kenya has come in a big way to make sure that there is free primary education to all the pre-primary and secondary education to its populace. But just like it has been outlined even in India, when this came into being, it meant that the population density in our schools was very, very, very high. Previously, we were contending with the aspect of lack of opportunities to school. Then when these opportunities opened up, then again, it was a challenge in terms of getting quality education. And this is where the bank has seen an opportunity, looking at the population in the country, which is predominantly having more women than men. You look at the opportunities and you find that a bigger chunk of your population is missing out on education because of cultural beliefs and things like that. So as a bank, we've been focused in terms of developing solutions for the parents, for them to be able to access school fees. Because you look at it in terms of gender empowerment, sometimes there would be preference in educating probably the boy child as opposed to the girl child. But once you are able to give solutions, and based on the businesses that you are financing from other lines, they're able to generate an income, and that income now is able to repay the facilities. So there's reason to take all the kids to school. Then again, if you look at the loans that we've given, the bigger chunk of our loans, 30% of our loans are specifically to women. We have male clients only dominating 50%, and the rest 20% is corporate, which is shared between women and men. So looking at it, we saw an opportunity in this particular space, especially based on the aspect of population, based on the population density, even looking at the gender gap, because you look at the number of schools that were there for boys, primarily we saw an opportunity where we can be able to support even other schools which are basically for women. And we are still on the growth trajectory. We are still in our journey for growth in the offering of the educational loans, both to individuals and to schools. But we see an opportunity of addressing the gender gap in education, which is a huge opportunity, which you'd want to capitalize on, and supporting the economic empowerment of basically women. Then I think based on what we have seen in terms of our lending, even on other portfolios, once you're giving women loans and to finance their businesses, the rate of repayment is very good. So computed together with financial literacy, it makes it even better for us as a bank. So financial literacy for us, yes, we'll do for the adults who might not have had access to education, but you're finding it prudent to start from the grassroots and grow all the way with our customers, so that we can be able to ensure that we are building long-term customer relationships. Remember, by focusing on education, you're also softening the ground for ourselves in terms of offering other products within the bank. So when we do this, we believe that it helps us differentiate ourselves from other banks even in the market, and also enhancing our corporate social responsibility in terms of making sure that the girl child is empowered. I think those would be the fundamental driving factors for us to be able to continue having financing the women, and especially the women in the education sector. Thank you.
Thank you, John Patrick. That was really helpful, and I love what you talk about WASH as well, and climate, and agriculture, for example. And I think this is all about not just serving more women, but really serving women better. And I'm not that familiar with the rest of Kenya, but I know in Nairobi that certainly with primary, it's really driven by low-cost non-state schools. So yeah, there's clearly a market opportunity for you there. So it's it'd be very interesting as we continue this conversation to explore how you can leverage that as a bank, as a commercial bank reaching into this sector. So thank you. I wanted to then turn to perhaps Cameron, turning back to you. In terms going back to that business case again, you must be getting a lot of data coming through around really promoting women-led education businesses. Could you talk maybe a little bit about that from your perspective? What is the data telling you about this market opportunity?
Absolutely, Deborah. There's a lot of positive data that we all know about financing to women, and the fact that women are more responsible when it comes to financial services. So all of that gets very nicely connected to this huge aspect where when you're financing an education institution that is either run by women or has a lot of women in there, and a lot of girl child in there as well, you've got to make sure that those small things matter. So when you're looking at a big objective, just the factor that when we're targeting these women-led or low-cost education institutions, we want to make it easy for women owners to access these loans. So conventionally, in countries like Pakistan, when you're accessing a loan, you need to have a male member be involved in the entire transaction. We have done away with that. We're saying, if you're a woman edupreneur, you can come to us. You don't need any male member. Actually, if you offer a collateral, which we'll talk about a bit later, and even that is owned by a woman, we are not only ready to accept it, we then reduce your markup rates as well. So the fact that when you're talking about making sure that education financing becomes accessible to everyone, it does require those small things to be taken care of. Another example from the data is that when we all know that having women involved in any financial transaction makes that transaction more credible. So even when we go to male-owned school owners, we convince them of having their wives or their principals who are involved in the school for many years as co-applicants. So we convince them to make them part of the transaction. And what that has done is it creates a very different seriousness in terms of the utilization of the loan. What we've seen is, as soon as you involve a woman in the equation in these schools, the entire prioritization becomes much more rational. So rather than an emotional outburst that we are now getting a 5 million rupee loan, whereas no one in Pakistan is giving that kind of an amount to these schools, the a school owner may want to invest in in acquiring more land or doing something that they feel is more profitable. But what we've seen is when you engage women, they would want to do something that enhances their capacity to serve more children, give them more better learning environments. So the data on positivity of targeting women directly correlates to education financing and strengthens the business case for investing in women-led education financing. So that's something that we feel the data strengthens our resolve to make sure that we keep targeting women-led institutions as well.
Thanks, Cameron. That's fascinating, and I think I certainly agree with you that small changes can make a big difference. I'd love to hear about more of those as we go through the conversation. So practical takeaways for financial institutions who are interested in starting or expanding education finance portfolio can learn from. Thank you so much. Adela, coming back to you and your experience in Guatemala, you mentioned earlier some of those really pervasive gender norms, and one thing that Cameron touched on was integrating men as well as women in this process, and how that can lead to better outcomes. Can you comment on that from your perspective in Guatemala?
Claro, con mucho
Of
gusto.
course, thank you. So the challenge of education in Guatemala is very strong. When we talk about literacy, there is a high level or a high percentage of people who cannot access education. As I mentioned before, women stay an average of 3 years in education, and in men would be 6 years, which we call primary school, but the quality of education is very low, and infrastructure is also very poor. So something that I would like to discuss or that I would like to comment, even though education is free at primary level, we are still working in order to have covered all the basic needs. And we can see this with other collaborators in the rest of the country. We can see that we need to invest a lot of time, a lot of resources in order to educate the collaborators, in order to have an education that is of quality. This happens all across the country. And we can also see this in the children of our customers. In our portfolio, we are talking about 400,000 customers, and we can talk about 25% who are illiterate, and maybe some of them, 25 or 35%, they only have access to 3 years of education. And this has allowed us, regarding data, this has allowed us to work a little bit more digitally, but there are a lot of barriers. As I mentioned before, some of them do not have access or do not have digital access. And this has motivated us to invest a lot in training, not only in business training, but also we wanted to have more than 600,000 participants in our programs of education. We are talking about different channels of education. And we have also added digital education in order to be able to access different levels, different customers, and obviously 7 out of 10 are women. So this is something that is key, and this is something that is a challenge for us. As I mentioned, infrastructure is very poor. And it has been very hard for us to try to create this interest and also to try to think about education in an intangible way. Something that we have seen is that on the market, there are very few people who are willing to actually take a loan for this because education is something that nobody knows where it goes. And something that we have done in the last 4 years is to invest in a 4 year or in a short courses. And this has also generated more opportunities. What we need is our population actually needs to cover very basic needs. The idea is to try to get to 9 years of education, and we're very far from that. And when we started in 2012, I think, when we started with these loans, we realized that we couldn't finance university courses because everybody were very far from that. So we started deepening, and nowadays we are financing primary schools, especially with customers who are working in agriculture, and that their cash or their income has to do with with the harvest. So this access is the one that we are trying to cover. And all our messages are addressing everything that has to do with boys and girls. And our presence in the field is very important. We call some of the people developers, but there are also facilitators that are in charge of training. And we also have some staff that are focused on also training collaborators regarding their sensitivity and their empathy regarding this sector that we serve. As I mentioned before, poverty is mainly focused on women, and something else that happens has to do with migration.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ok, perfecto.
No, puede continuar.
Ok, gracias. Solo termino con esto.
So, in order to sum up, right, is that there is an issue with migration, is that mainly the migrants that are staying in Guatemala are women, and everything that has to do with hacking has to do with that. And as I was saying, it has to do with generating technical skills for this.
Thanks so much, Adela. I mean, you touched on so many of the cultural nuances, I think, in Guatemala, and as an MFI that really targets women living in poverty in rural areas, that ability that you talked about to match the repayment terms of the loan products for schooling to the agricultural and rural incomes of the client base that you serve, I think is a really important innovation. And yeah, it's great to hear your success in that. And I was taken aback by the 600,000 participants in your training capacity building. That's really phenomenal. Congratulations. Let's move on from the business case, which I think is becoming increasingly evident, to the sort of social, or if you like, impact case. And maybe, John Patrick, I can turn to you again as a commercial bank in Kenya. Why would you as a commercial bank engage in this kind of gender approach to education finance, beyond the fact, obviously, that it could be quite a lucrative market for a financial institution? And I guess I'm keen to understand really your motivation, and maybe if you could touch on a specific initiative or strategy that you're adopting to really meet the needs of women and girls. Thanks, John Patrick.
Thank you. I think for us as a bank, we have seen the opportunity in this particular regard. And the essence of why we are focusing a lot on education is, just like I had mentioned before, the aspect of successfully repaid loan by the loans that we've given to women. Remember, I said our genesis, we were financing women and youth, and they form the bulk of even our customers. So the minute that you've been able to address their needs in terms of like getting food, the basic that is food, shelter, clothing, the education also is very key for them to be able to live a quality life. So looking at the focus areas, which are health, education, wash, and agri, for us as a bank, it makes a perfect sense for us to immerse ourselves in this particular sector. And I think we've been having also partners who are coming on board to help us in our journey to making sure that we are able to offer solutions to schools. Remember, just like I said, for us, we are focusing a lot on giving even loans to schools, especially girls' schools, because just like you said, you'll find that in most of these girls' schools, you'll find that the majority of the people who are running these schools are women. So even looking at the default rate on that particular front, and us being a commercial bank also with a profit motive at the end of the day, we see it making a lot of sense in us doing business from that particular front. I think the other thing for us that we look a lot of is the risk profiles that school present to us in the education sector. I think if you look at the current small portfolio we are holding for schools, the level of default is very, very low. So if we are able to continue lending into this space, then it gives us an opportunity to be able to even grow our business and also ensure there is more customer retention from that particular side. Then we look at once we have given the business loans and the customers are able to transact and do 1, 2, other 3 things, we are finding a lot of repeat loans coming from, especially from the women who are now running these businesses, because now they pay for the first term, then they repay within a couple of months. By then, their businesses has generated more money, and they're able to come and get another loan for the second term and the third term, respectively. So just like I said in the beginning, we believe focusing on women is empowering the community. We focus a lot on making sure that we also onboard potential partners who are able to support us in this journey. We've had some who are coming to give us solutions, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this as the conversation goes, who are probably offering even liquidity, who are giving portfolio guarantees. The latest discussion we are having is with the largest telecom in the country, Safaricom, where we are looking at digitizing the textbooks, because one of the key challenges that you are facing is the aspect of the cost of education in the country. So the minute we digitize, you find that it becomes, someone gets a tablet and instead of buying textbooks from grade 1 up to grade 9, now they're able to get a tablet that sorts them out through the whole year, and the amount that they pay to access the textbooks now even becomes much lower. So for us as a bank, makes perfect commercial sense for us to continue playing in this space. The repayment experience also demonstrates that this is a space that we want to continue playing in, and also having impact on the community and softening the ground for us to be able to also do other business with the same community comes in a long way.
Mm. Thank you, John Patrick. That's really helpful, and it sounds like you're really having success in terms of the sort of repeat borrowers that you talk about, and working alongside women proprietors as they go through their journeys in the education space. Thank you so much. Maybe then, Cameron, I'll turn to you, and we're talking about specific ways that we can better serve women in the education finance space. And I'd love if you could maybe touch on this issue of collateral, so that we know that that's one of the constraints outside education that women face, especially when they're looking at larger loan sizes. Is it naive to think that a woman proprietor can just simply use her school building as collateral? That's what maybe some of the audience might be thinking. Can you touch on that briefly? Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you for that very important question, Deborah, because I've been typing some of the answers that the audience was exactly, posing on that topic. First of all, that myth that, an edupreneur who already has been able to start a school has, in Pakistan, one of the myths that was also broken is that women own land, they own property. Some of the women who are probably older women, they end up having good properties in their name, right? So these school owners, they are being the women school owners, we encourage them that, look, soon as you're able to offer a collateral, there should be anyone's collateral, your own property, property owned by your mother or your aunt or your friend. We are ready to take that as a collateral. So you've got to, as I said, the small things matter. Create ease of access through giving them this comfort that they are trusting the institution to, register their asset or their friend's asset with us. And we give them the comfort that, look, this is a last resort sort of a thing. What it does is it enhances your credibility, reduces your markup. Now, in terms of this factor, whether the school building should be taken as collateral, we avoid doing that because, of course, there's a social element to it. But again, as I said, the myths that they would not have any other asset, we even allow them to offer gold to us as a collateral, right? So the fact that once you start digging deeper into this, you start realizing that when you start encouraging these women entrepreneurs and these owners that, look, you've got the ability to make a non-productive asset that is just lying over there. You've got a piece of agricultural land in your mother's name in the village, and we can use that as collateral to enhance your loan size 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and give you a substantial decrease in the markup. And when it comes to, whether that reduction in the markup impacts the business case for a potential investor, the answer is no, because now you're enhancing the credibility of that loan. It's a high value loan, but the possibility of that loan defaulting gets reduced. So you're now having a secured portfolio. So the fact that, again, breaking those myths was very important in a country like Pakistan. One of the things that I missed out in the beginning, we're a $3 billion market there. The fact that, and we feel that at least close to 50% of that has a huge linkage with women owners or women teachers. And of course, clearly more than 50% students in and out, actually out of school are almost 65%, but even the girls in school are over 50%. So the entire equation needs to be seen in a broader sense. And what we've seen practically, and we have these great examples, women then rush in with all sorts of ideas. They say we have a vehicle. We even take vehicles, the movable property as collateral. It's a simple thing. You take that vehicle into as a security, and you put the insurance. You get an insurance which is co-insured in the name of the institution. So the fear that the asset might get stolen, so you've got a co-insurance. So there are ways. Soon as you start engaging with the customer, they come to you with solutions. And as I said in the beginning, when you involve women into the equation, they immediately make this entire transaction much more rational. They come up with ideas that sometimes even amaze us. And one last point, in terms of making sure that women are also given the opportunity that, when a school owner tells a principal or a senior teacher that she's going to be involved in a financial transaction and she's going to be part of that, discussion, that automatically encourages her to become an entrepreneur in the future. So now she knows that there's an institution that's ready to finance her if she takes that initiative. So it's also, encouraging future entrepreneurs when you're targeting institutions like this.
Thanks, Cameron. That some really innovative things that Talim is doing around those, I guess, societal barriers around property ownership that I think a lot of us could learn from. Those barriers that impede women from taking finance, borrowing for their schools in the first place, but then expanding the schools as well through finance. So thank you for it's sparking some ideas maybe in this group about what we could do better. John Patrick, how do you find that experience in Kenya, either in terms of collateralization, or maybe you could touch on the need for concessional finance in your market, for example, to really increase outreach to women and improve the quality of the services that we're providing?
Yes, thank you. I think for us in the country, one of the things that we see is going to help us a lot is especially getting partners to support us in our journey, where we can be able to get even concessional financing. Because remember, our cost of funds in the country is actually quite high. So at times we end up giving these loans at a premium, which ends up being a big burden to the school. So when we get concessional financing, then that helps us a lot in terms of making sure that we push affordable loans to the schools and to anyone who's borrowing with an educational need. Apart from that, we do have partners who come on board to help us, especially in doing the blended financing, where they are able to help us in terms of how we structure our facilities. At Sidian Bank, we believe in not just a product off the shelf, but essentially coining a solution per customer who walks into our doors, so that we make sure that at the end of the day, our loan does not become a burden. So looking at that particular front, we have partners who've come on board, the likes of AGF, the likes of USA, the likes of Nasira, that's from FMO, who have come on board and they've told us, we are willing to give you portfolio guarantees. And the beauty with it is this, especially the people who are giving us portfolio guarantees, some of them are even going a notch higher and saying that women-run businesses or businesses which are predominantly serving women, they are going to get more preferential terms. For example, if it's the portfolio guarantees, you find that a normal customer, male customer walking in, they are guaranteed up to maybe 50% of their facility, but women are guaranteed up to between 70 and 75 of the facility that they've taken. So this makes it much, much easier for the bank to even access more, give more credit to this particular sector. Then I think for us, we low default rate that you are seeing in this particular space, we are also having a very good pricing model where you find, especially for schools and the ones that are run by women, you find that taking everything constant, if you are to apply a school that is run by the male counterparts as opposed to the women, you'll find that our rating in terms of interest rate is much lower for the facilities that you are giving to these women. So looking at that particular front, it again makes it easy for us to be able to create growth in this particular space. So we are also looking for partners who can be able to support us, especially in technical assistance. That is also especially in capacity building. You find some of the schools have been started in places where there's a need and there's someone who has identified this need, but they might not necessarily have the technical expertise and they might need to be guided in terms of how to run a school. Some might be just a teacher whose profession is actually in teaching, but now they've been given an obligation to run a school. So again, partners who come on board and help us in terms of building this capacity, again, helps us in a very, very, very big way. So I think just putting it in a nutshell, if we have partners who are helping us from a liquidity perspective, having cheaper funds to on lend, portfolio guarantees, technical assistance, then also incentives. We have partners who are coming on board and telling us that we give performance-based incentives or grants, such that if you've given a loan to a particular school, and they have repaid probably even faster than it was envisioned, can we give part of that, reduce the principal through a grant? Some are saying if you've taken a loan to, for example, put up a classroom, and you've been able to complete the whole project, if the project was £1,000,000, can we give you 20% back in terms of reducing your principal obligation to the bank? All these are ways that we can be able to encourage lending to the sector and making it easier for us as a bank to continue playing in the same space. Thank you.
Thank you, John Patrick. And I think we're just going to come into very briefly challenges before opening up to Q&A. So just have one question each for Cameron and Adela. Maybe, Cameron, you can touch back on the point John Patrick just made about the importance of partnerships. But yeah, I mean, we talk about education finance. Many of the stakeholders, of course, are women and girls. And there are so many needs, the needs to promote women in leadership, the urgent need to increase school enrollment for girls and improve the quality of learning that girls get when they're in school, and encourage young girls to attend TVET and pursue their skills. Maybe Adela, I understand that you at Fundación Genesis have introduced an edupreneur loan, a Grupal loan. Could you talk about that very, very briefly with maybe touch on the main challenges that you've had or main challenge that you've had in introducing that loan? Thanks, Adela. And then I'll come back to you, Cameron.
Claro, con gusto. Hay un fenómeno interesante que sí
So there
está
is
sucediendo.
an interesting
Y es
phenomenon that is
que cuando
happening
visitamos,
when
digamos,
we visit
universidades, centros educativos,
universities and
sí es
education
satisfactorio ver que el
centers.
número de
It is
mujeres que
very
están en
satisfying to
esas aulas
see that the number of
está
women that are in the
superándose, ¿sí?
classrooms
Cada
are
vez
always
hay mayor
higher and
participación
higher.
de
There
mujeres
is more and more
en los centros
participation and
educativos. Y
engagement of
también hay un
women
fenómeno
in the education
interesante de mayor
centers, in
rendimiento
the
académico.
education institutions,
Así que
and the same
nuestro
happens as
desafío
regards
está
quality. So
en
our main
continuar
challenge
motivando
is to
y generando
continue
capacidad de
motivating
pago
and
en los padres de
generating
familia
payment
que por cierto se había
capacities
escapado
in
decirles
parents.
recientemente
And
recibimos
I
de
forgot
60
to tell
decibeles
you that
ya unos
we
primeros
received
resultados
already some results, and what they are actually checking is that the customers are indicating to have more and more resources in order to set better education for their children. So these are different highlights that we are seeing. And obviously, we need to guarantee that the basic needs regarding food is satisfied in order to promote investment in children. And we know that this changes lives. We have already seen, we have a lot of testimonies that there are a lot of changes, but it's still a challenge. And it is still hard to get funding regarding education, mainly taking into account that we need an optimum funding for this. Something that I would like to highlight is that this is the lowest rates that we have regarding education loans. And something else that we have noticed has to do with the universities and education institutions that are very reluctant regarding interest rates, and they wouldn't like to share this information with institutions, with students, I mean, because, well, they don't want to share whether this is something that could be an access to or not. So this is something that we are working on. We would like these institutions to facilitate the access to data. We're also working with parents. We also have different programs for young students and for other students who are 12, 15, and 18. These are virtual classes, virtual courses that I believe that probably there are 7 or 8,000 participants. And we are also trying to train parents in order to start thinking that it's not just primary school and then they get married or they start working, but in order to continue to other education institutions or their entrepreneurship, their business, in order to get better jobs. The idea is to try to work both with parents and with students in order to strengthen their values and empower girls. And we have been very successful in this. And as I mentioned, we're trying to motivate, to promote this in different angles from different perspectives. And the idea is that people are actually interested in this because we don't want to cover some students that really quit their schools. This is something that has happened so many times. And there are so many reasons for this. So we're trying to change that. And as I said, well, we are trying to also include employment insurance, unemployment insurance, and trying to look for different alternate ways in order to solve these barriers.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you touched on the importance of really focusing on attitudes and behaviors. And I think, yeah, probably Cameron and John Patrick would reinforce that perspective. It's really, really important sort of holistic approach that you're taking. I want to jump back to Cameron. We're slowly running out of time, Cameron, but can you quickly share maybe a perspective around what education finance cannot achieve on its own? You know, what is the role for partners? What is the role for smart subsidy? Very briefly, if you may.
Yes, yeah, but before I do that, just in 10 seconds, one of the questions that keeps coming up is how do we access first-time women borrowers, women edupreneurs? And my answer to that is keep it simple for them. Give them the confidence, start the relationship with an advisory, start telling them what does it entail, how to prioritize their needs, and then how to become, how to access finance which is most relevant and useful for them. Having said that, so that's how the relationship would always become more stable and would be a positive and a robust portfolio build up. Deborah, in terms of what financing cannot achieve, and for sure in our experience, is the non-financial side, where any education institution, low-cost institution, can never flourish without an investment on its teachers and an investment in technology. You know, tech adoption and capacity building of teachers is something that no school owner is going to take the school on a markup and invest that in the capacity building of a teacher, or even adopt a technology platform that requires grant funding, that requires blended finance, that requires some sort of a subsidy. And we become catalysts for that because we're giving them financial services, a financial product for enhancing their capacity to earn more profits due to the enhancement of this classroom. Now, the education finance company becomes a great catalyst for privatizing their non-financial needs, which is how do we invest in teacher capacity building? How do we invest in the school owners' capacity building? What are the advantages of adopting technology, school management systems, becoming capable of having edtech solutions? You know, one of the biggest challenges of the pandemic was these schools didn't have any edtech solutions, so they actually had to shut down or stay off. So these are areas that will never get addressed through core education finance. Will always require some sort of subsidy, and that's where, you know, all types of stakeholders need to come in. It's not just the debt or the equity provider. It's got to be that impact investor. It's got to be that grant provider. But as I said, the education finance company becomes a segue or a catalyst for that relationship to make it more successful, to make it more impactful, and as I said, you know, targeted towards highest impact in terms of the ultimate learning outcome or the ultimate outcome of having improved learning outcomes.
Fabulous. Thank you, Cameron. Yeah, there's clearly a role to play for various stakeholders at different phases in the education cycle and in the education sector. So yeah, thank you for that. And the clear role of targeted subsidy. It shouldn't all be placed on the shoulders of the education finance provider. I can see that very clearly. Thank you. And there's been some great questions coming in from the audience. Hopefully you can see some of the answers coming in as well. Thank you to our panelists for responding on those. Going back briefly, Cameron, you've already answered this at the beginning of your earlier comment, but John Patrick, maybe over to you in terms of really focusing on first-time borrowers for education. What are some of the marketing strategies that you employ to reach women particularly? But even I think one of the comments we had is, you know, inclusivity isn't just women. How do you reach, for example, proprietors who may have a disability, for example? Could you touch on that very briefly? And then we might have to come to a close.
Yes, thank you. I think for us, the way we reach out, first of all, is anytime there's a forum that is in having education stakeholders, we do make sure that we support and we attend just to tell them in terms of the opportunities that they can get with the bank. We look forward to also financing opportunities where we are having some of the proprietors, even if they are physically challenged, we are more than willing, because as we look at the capacity and the ability of the school to be able to meet its obligation at the end of the day. So for us, very, very keen to make sure that we are able to support from that particular end. I think to answer also some of the questions that are appearing on the chat, is that for us as a commercial bank, we are also interested in tracking. Remember, when we are investing in these schools, if something as basic as even buying a bus, we want to celebrate with that school and show that we've bought a bus. If it's a classroom we've built, we want to celebrate because we want to measure the impact. Now, how many students are graduating from this particular school and what impact is it having in the community? Because these are future customers who are coming to borrow with us. We have participated. I've seen a question asking whether we have been participating in scholarships. We have done this in the past, and quite a number of organizations now in the country, especially banks, have been playing in this key sector very, very well. But we've noticed that as much as we might sponsor the students, some of them now will lack the basic facilities that they would get in these particular schools. So we are seeing the need to support the school itself for that to be able now to absorb even more girls who are coming to these particular institutions. So for us, we look at it, there's a huge opportunity. Again, I cannot emphasize enough on the aspect of blended finance, which can go a long way in making sure that we access even more credit to the schools that approach us for financing. So we'll attend forums, We will go to our digital platforms and reach out to whoever might be interested to come to us so that we can discuss a solution. In addition to that, we also use word of mouth referral because that works magic. It is trusted, it is believed, and it works magic because there's not too much back and forth. I think just in a nutshell, in the interest of time, let me just stop at that. Yeah.
Thank you. That's fascinating, and I can't believe the hour has come to a close already. You've all of you have submitted such great questions, and we're going to find a way of following up with you on those. And yeah, I just wanted to, before we finish, just really say thank you to our panelists, to John Patrick, to Adela, to Cameron, and also our education finance team in the background, Divya, Carolina, Omara, and others. Thank you so much. It's just great to see this global participation and interest in the subject. I saw participants from Colombia, from Peru, from Nigeria, from Indonesia. Thank you for joining. You know, panelists, thank you. You all work in very different contexts for very different institutions. I think what it's clear is we need more investment in this space, whether it's state or non-state schools, and innovative approaches like the ones you've taken to really incentivize more equitable access for both learners and providers, women and girls. But it is a really unique opportunity for financial institutions to consider gender equity in education finance and really tap into that market. And Cameron, some of the figures you shared about the size of the market opportunity, I think really, really striking. Yes, I think all the panelists you shared that there are many challenges and some really, for example, persistent gender norms that we need to address. But I think a gender equitable approach to education finance can really, really help to mitigate some of those challenges. And, you know, as Cameron, you said, small changes can make a really big difference. So for those of you on the line, if you didn't get your questions answered, please do reach out to our ETAF team, especially if you're wanting to expand your education portfolio. The ETAF team is really actively working on gender mainstreaming within our technical assistance and supporting financial institutions that are looking to adopt that kind of lens into their product offerings and within their institution. So to know more about the topic, and please do reach out to the organisers of the webinar. But I think probably with that, I will wish you all a fantastic day. Just thank you again for joining us. Adela, muchísimas gracias por
Gracias,
participar.
Deborah.
Thank
Gracias
you.
a
Thank you
todos.
very
Un
much.
gusto.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Cameron.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks, Patrick.
Again, the entire
Estén muy
team.
bien.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a
Goodbye.
good day, everyone. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So much, everyone. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Divya.
Thank you. Thank you, Divya.
I wish we could stay on and answer more questions.
Thank you for all.